for nearly 20 years. That's 2 decades to you and me. Her award-winning column, Home on the Range, ran in the Chicago Tribune and other newspapers. Leah, thank you.
A couple of years ago, I got a call from an old college friend. His name's Arthur Levine. Arthur has had a great career in publishing. He discovered a young writer named J.K. Rowling, you know, Harry Potter. So when Arthur calls, you know, you take his call. Anyway, he's full of good ideas. Arthur told me about a new project he was working on. He was going to do this book. It was a book about a cookbook author. Her name is Etta Serby Macklin. And she had become a very famous, as I said, cookbook author. And of course, I've been writing about food forever. So I figured Arthur was calling for some kind of referral. Maybe he needed a food stylist. Maybe he needed someone to test his recipes. I was like, that's great, Arthur. How can I help? And he's, no. You're going to write the book. So that's how I came to write this book. Of course, the first thing I said to him is, what's the travel budget? At first, there wasn't any travel budget, but we negotiated that. So I had to go to where this person grew up. And where she grew up is this tiny town called ITALIA. I don't know if any of you know this town. It's in Tuscany. It's beautiful. It is built out of a kind of stone called tuff, which is a hardened volcanic stone. It's very white, very lightweight. And in part because the town is white, it has long been known as Little Jerusalem. But also, it's called Little Jerusalem in part because it has a continuous 400-year history of a large Jewish population, which is pretty unusual for a tiny town in Tuscany. Etta was born there in 1927, and of course at that point, as she was growing up, it was under the strictures of Mussolini's rule. So by the time she was a teenager, by the time she was 17, her father, who was the local rabbi, in addition to having 3 other jobs, could no longer work any of his jobs. Her mother could no longer actually purchase food, and she could no longer go to school. So they're living a very restricted life. They are sitting down to dinner one night. They're having bread soup, which is, in this case, bread with some broth. And all of a sudden, their upstairs neighbor just bursts into their home. She's holding a ricotta pudding for some reason. Anyway, she says, "You are in danger, pack and go." So Etta and 3 of her teenage siblings stand up and they walk out the door into the night. And they spend the next 7 months on the run. And that is where my book starts. And I'm going to read you a little chunk from the beginning of that adventure. So the very first night, they locate a friend of the family, and they stay with that friend, who really is not willing to shelter them more than one night because it's too dangerous for her. And so the next morning, they're basically just walking around Tuscany trying to figure out what they're going to do. And that's where this chapter takes place. It's November 28, 1943. Lello wasn't calm like Papa, nor wise like Mama, but he was her older brother, her oldest brother, and Stella felt secure tromping in his footsteps. He'd already roamed the nighttime woods doing something. He would find them a place to sleep somewhere, but they could hardly approach a strange hut, Hansel and Gretel style, and ask the startled peasants to house 2 fugitives. Lello knew a cave. The wide, dry caves below Pitiliano came in handy for playing house, setting up forts, or crouching during hide and seek. Craggy coves etched into the exterior walls of the village served as stables and storerooms. Far outside of town, off sunken pathways, deep caverns exhaled the cold stench of ancient burial sites. She hoped it was a good cave. "It's this way," Lello said. But Stella could tell from his staggered steps that he really wasn't sure. "The fellows stashed some wine there," he said, "on one of our missions." "Rifles? Fellows? Missions?" Stella kept quiet and followed. She peered into the trees. Every lost maiden, evil witch, shiny pomegranate, severed hand, talking bird, and magic elixir lurked. Were folk tales needlessly gruesome or somehow true? Here it is, said Lello, I think. He parted a thicket of bamboo, exposing a dark stone mouth. We just have to shimmy under. Stella shook off her pack and bent low, but her spine scraped against the teeth. She lay flat to the spongy soil, squinching her eyes shut, and wriggled into the dark. Cautiously, hands over head, they stood. The air was cool and damp. It let off a sharp vinegar scent, like Regina's nesting box. They could see nothing. Stella sensed a soft flutter. She heard a soft voice. Someone's here, she shouted. No, said Lello, you're imagining. Someone's here, she insisted, quietly. Lello let out a sigh. I'll waste one match, he offered. We'll find that stash of wine. Stella heard the scratch, smelled the sulfur, saw the flame. It took a moment for their pupils to contract. The walls of the cave were lined top to bottom with smaller caves. From each tiny cave peered 2 almond eyes. Stella screamed. She was scrambling for the opening when her brother grabbed her arm. Doves, he said. It's a dove cote. It took Stella a long time to slow the drumbeat in her chest, to agree to sit down, to lie down in the dark. Were the birds still staring with their almond eyes? Would they swoop at her? They're asleep, said Lello. Now you sleep. They both cast back to nights at home, each of which ended the same. Papa holding his hands above the heads of his children. May God make you good, he would say. Amen. So that's the beginning of this adventure that has a lot of drama. But the book tells 2 stories. That's one storyline, that's Stella. The other is Etta. Etta is an immigrant to the United States. She's arrived in 1958, and she's feeling like a fish out of water in her new home in Croton-on-Hudson, New York. That's, as many of you know, in Westchester. Not where she had hoped to end up, and not where she's feeling at home. And I'll just read you a little section from that. This is in 1960. The salesmen were pesky as squirrels and twice as hard to scare off. Etta had no need of an Electrolux vacuum or a fuller brush. She drew down her eyebrows before opening the door, surprised to find not another hearty handshake, but a pie. The Pyrex plate was steadied by 2 limp woven squares. The squares were gripped by a young woman. Her name was Mary. She couldn't wait to meet her new next-door neighbor. Etta smoothed her forehead and invited Mary in. Mary just loved her accent. Was she Italian? Did she know that lots of folks in Croton came from back there, back when they built that dam? Did she realize that there was a real Italian restaurant in town? They should all go Saturday night. Mary and Joe, Etta and Jean, a double date. Pizzeria Grande was done up in red and white checks. The tablecloth felt like a raincoat and smelled of wet rag. It was decorated with a bottle of Chianti, already open. Etta touched the straw covering. We call this a fiasco, she said. Get out of here, shouted Joe. This place is the best. Etta ordered the chicken. What arrived first was a bowl of red sauce. Underneath, she found gluey ropes of pasta pocked with big balls of hamburger. What is this? She asked. Get out of here, shouted Joe. You've never had spaghetti and meatballs? She had not. So, Etta fixed that problem by inviting her new neighbors over, cooking for them, and introducing to them to what she considered real Italian cuisine, Jewish Italian cuisine. And eventually people started asking her for recipes. First she said, what's a recipe? Eventually she learned to write them down. She would give them to her friends. And eventually she became a cookbook author, quite a well-known cookbook author. I call her the Julia Child of Italian Jewish cuisine. She was on TV. She actually published 5 cookbooks in her lifetime. And every chapter of my book includes one of the Stella stories, one of the Etta stories, and they're joined together by one of her recipes, which I've updated for the way we cook today as opposed to the way they cooked then. One of the recipes in the book is something that's very unique to the town of Pitigliano. In fact, it is considered the town pastry, and I love this tradition. Like, I wish every town had a town pastry. However, this pastry is a little unusual. It's looks like a long stick like this. It's got this golden flaky pastry on the outside. It has nuts and honey on the inside. It's delicious. And it's called sofrati. And the long stick shape is meant to resemble the sticks used to evict Jews from Italy. So it's kind of a bit of a mixed blessing of a pastry. I actually baked you all sofrati, and I have little samples of it here, which you can pick up when you come by my book. You don't have to buy a book, you can have the sofrati. But you know, cooking was very important to Etta and very important to me in my life as someone who writes about food. And I'm just going to read you a little chunk from a crazy story. This is a novel, but everything in the novel is true. It's all the places are real, all the people are real, and all the dates are real. And so I mention that because this is kind of hard to believe, but while Stella's on the run with 3 of her siblings, her parents and youngest brother, who's 9 years old, are actually in a concentration camp nearby. And I know this is crazy, but the concentration camp is set up in the summer home of the local bishop. And later, when part of the family is reunited in the town near this concentration camp, they end up living in the villa that belongs to the head of the fascist party from this town. And to make matters even weirder, they've been there a few days, there's a knock on the door, and in comes this whole group of Nazi commanders. And they commandeer the house, and they're like, okay, we're moving in, we're gonna run our operation from this house, you all are gonna host us and cook for us. So here's Etta, who's, you know, been on the run, she's just reunited with her parents, and she is the cook to this Nazi command. So here she is cooking. The Serbies took up their roles as the fascist family Leopoldo. Papa hosted, Mama tidied up, Etta cooked. But what? The putrid stew her family had faced in that camp? The weeds she had chewed in the woods? Maybe Bavarian cream sprinkled with poison. She set an onion on the chopping block and cleaved it cleanly. Sharp and bitter shot up her nose, stung her eyes, and flowed down her cheeks. Strength poured through her arms and into her hands, which seemed to have a plan of their own. They diced the onions, smashed the garlic, stewed both in a pool of golden olive oil, pried open a jar of tomatoes, squeezed the red bulbs into the skillet, and set the sauce to simmering. Now Etta turned her attention to fresh ricotta mixed with flour, eggs, and spring spinach. Her palms rolled the gnocchi into tiny spheres, her whole body relaxed. Cooking was an act of love. She would serve her family her deepest affection, no matter who else commandeered that meal. I'll just tell you one more thing, which is people often ask me about the title. It's called Like Wafers in Honey. The phrase comes from Exodus. This is when the Israelites are wandering in the desert. They've got nothing, right? They have no homes, they have nothing to eat. And every night they go to sleep, and while they're sleeping, God frosts the ground with manna. And in the morning, they scoop up these flakes, and they eat it, and what does it taste like? It tastes like wafers in honey. And Etta survived, her entire family survived, and how did she survive? Luck, largely, but also because strangers fed her, and she never forgot that. She never forgot that that's what permitted her to survive. And so even though she had mixed feelings about her new country, and she had mixed feelings about her old country, I think the generosity of strangers was always important to her, and that spirit flows through this book. So I hope you find it a delicious read, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you.
Did you get the meat part? Never.
Oh, good question. So what inspired my editor to even think of this as a book was reading her obit, which ran in the New York Times in 2019. She died in 2019. So I did not get to meet her, but luckily, first she wrote all these books. And even though they were cookbooks, she scattered little stories about her life in Pitiliano throughout her books. And she wrote a memoir, which she self-published, but was super helpful to me because it had a ton of information. And then both she and several members of her family gave interviews to the Shoah Foundation, which collects testimony from survivors of not only genocide in the World War II, but other genocides that have happened throughout history. And so I was able to watch these tapes of her talk about her life, her sister, and some other members of the family. And also she was kind of this public figure, so you can go back and find old tapes. She was like on Anderson Cooper one night, and I've seen her like peel an artichoke on TV, so there was a lot of source material. But no, I never met her. Yes?
Sounds like a fascinating read. I can't wait to read it. Have you done historical fiction before? Why was it the editor reached out to you particular? Because you spoke about your career as a food writer, so this is kind of a break from that.
It is, yeah. So yes, I am a journalist by training, and I write about food. And I think Arthur thought of me because he liked the voice that I bring to my food writing, which is quite lyrical. To his credit, he was very open to any format when he brought the book to me. He was like, well, it could be a book for kids, it could be a book for adults, it could be a biography, it could be a novel. And I was like, not a novel, I don't write fiction. But sitting down with my editor and my agent and talking about it, they both convinced me to try fiction, because essentially it would offer more latitude in telling the story. And so that's what I did, and I was scared because I had never written a word of fiction, maybe in one class in college or something, but it was a fun adventure, and it turned out to be a lot of fun. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a comment. If anybody has ever been to Tuscany, Pitiliano is on a hill. I mean, it's on almost like Palisades. And you can see how isolated it is.
Yes.
And that would be a way, Letizia, she's Italian. She's an Italian chef. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting pictures of Pitiliano on Facebook.
Yes.
If you just look it up. It's fascinating. And it's very obvious because it's up there all by itself. And it's tufo. It's that volcanic rock that's left over.
Yeah. And it's isolated in many ways, like it, in addition to like the Sephardi that I mentioned. So the Jews of Pitiliano made matzah, which of course Jews all over the world make matzah, but in Pitiliano they make it a different way than it's made anywhere else, and it's oval, not square, and it has this lace pattern in it. So like, so much about the culture is just like completely unique to this one place. So yeah, if you're in Tuscany, worth a visit, or you can just visit in my book. Other questions or comments?